Hello, third grade, and welcome to Unit 1 of Social Studies. We're going to be starting on Chapter 1, and this chapter talks about communities in our country and our world. So in this chapter, we're going to explore communities in the United States and around the world. You'll read about the features that make these communities special. We'll also learn about ways that these features affect how people live, how they work, and how they play. Now, what you're going to be doing at the end of this chapter is you're going to be creating a travel brochure, kind of like a pamphlet or a document that is talking about your community and what makes your community unique and special. So you're not going to be working with a team for this one. These are going to be individual. You're going to use words, pictures, and maps to create a travel brochure about your community, basically making something that's inviting people to come to your community. What makes your community special? What makes it unique? So your project checklist will include, think of ways that your community is different from other ones. Choose at least 3 features that make your community special. Conduct your research to learn more about these features. Determine how to present the features in a travel brochure. So what might a picture or a written summary or a map tell about each of the features? Create your brochure, make sure it's got pictures, that your writing is all neat, that you have maps, make sure it's organized, and then you're going to share it with the rest of the class once we get to that point. So this page is going to be on page 2 and 3 in your inquiry journal. That's the workbook for social studies. And then we're going to jump in. Our next set of pages will have all of the vocabulary words that we're going to talk about in this chapter. So what we're going to do for this page is we're going to look at each word that's written in red, and we're going to check off we either know it, we've heard it, or we don't know it. We're going to leave the notes section for now empty, and as we're coming across those words in our reading and the definition of those words, we're going to come back and fill that in. Lesson 1. Where is my community and what is it like? So you're going to learn in this lesson, you will use your investigative skills to explore different kinds of communities and where they are found. Why are you learning it? Because reading and talking about different kinds of communities will help you to understand more about your own community. And you will be able to write a paragraph about your community and why people chose to live there or choose to live there. Look closely at the pictures. Which place is more like your community? Explain your answer. So there is a rural community that we see up here. And then we have down here what we call an urban community. So your urban community is more like a city. A rural community is more like farther out farming towns, places that are on big pieces of land where people grow crops or have livestock and animals. Now we're going to jump onto page 8. So for all of these pages at the beginning of the lesson, you're going to have this blue section on the sides of the page, and it'll be numbered off 1, 2, and 3, or there may be more. And it's going to tell you what to do while you're reading these sections. So for number 1, it says, read the text and look at the map and the photos. What do maps and photos show? Circle words you do not know. Underline clues that help you answer the questions. What is a map? What is a satellite image? What community is shown in the satellite image and the map? And then you have a notes section to keep your notes. For number 2, it says, look again. How can you tell that the same community is shown in both satellite images and on the map? Circle a location in the photo, then circle the same location on the map. And for number 3, make connections. Think about the communities shown on the photos on page 7. What might you use as a street, or what might you use a street map for those communities for? What might you use satellite images for? So you can put your answers for question number 3 in the My Notes section if you like. Maps and satellite images. A map is a helpful tool. It's a drawing that can show where streets, parks, and other landmarks are located in a community. A map is different from a photo. A photo shows an image of the actual community. A satellite image is a photo of a place taken from high above it. In a satellite image, you can see the roofs of buildings, treetops, cars, and sometimes even people. If there are lots of trees, some streets might be hard to see. A map does not include every detail. A map shows things that make it a useful tool. For example, a street map shows clearly where streets are located. People use street maps to see how they can get from one place to another in their community. A satellite image can also be a helpful tool. It shows what a place actually looks like from above. You can see where buildings are located and the type of land a place has. So let's take a look at these images. We have a satellite image of Detroit and then a street map of Detroit. So we're going to make sure you go through these sections, underline what is a map, underline what is a satellite image, what community is shown in the satellite image and the map. So we know that these are images of Detroit. For number 2, how can you tell that they're both of the same place? Circle a location on each one that's the same. So you can tell that these are the same because if you look at the patterns of the streets over here, how it kind of looks like it branches out from this main central street. Here's our main central street. And we can see those streets that are branching out from it. We can see this big field right here and the big baseball park right here, just like you can see them here in the picture. So all these are little signs that tell you that we're looking at the same place, but using different kinds of imaging, different kinds of maps. Now for page 10, it says explore summarizing. When you summarize, you find the most important ideas you read or see. Then you tell these ideas in your own words. Summarizing can help you remember information. Read the text all the way through. This will help you understand what the text is about. Look for the most important details. Details tell more about the main idea. Explain the text in a sentence or two. When you summarize, you use your own words to tell the most important ideas from a text. Based on the text you read, work with your class to complete the chart below. So pick 3 details from the previous page that we read and then summarize them all together. So you can put information about what a map is, what a satellite image is. You can talk about what they do and don't do. You can talk about the different kinds of maps. And then what you're going to do is summarize that into just a couple sentences into the summary box. Now for page 11, we are going to use our textbook, our research companion, and we're going to look at pages 8 to 17. We're going to use our investigative skills to look for the text evidence that helps us summarize what we've learned about locating and describing communities. This chart is going to help us organize our notes. So we're going to pick 5 different things from the reading on pages 8 to 17, and then we're going to summarize them and put them together into a nice, neat few sentences for page 11. Now I've already opened up our textbook over here on the next page. Our textbook, we're going to open up to page 8, just like it told us in the workbook. And the title is, Where is My Community and What is it like? What makes a community? You live in a community. A community is a place where people live, work, and play. The United States is a large country with many different communities. What is your community like? All communities are alike in some ways. Every community has homes where people live. Communities also have places where people work. Most communities have schools, libraries, and places of worship. Many communities have fire and police departments to help keep people safe. All communities have leaders who help decide what the laws should be and what kinds of services the community needs. Communities can also be different from each other. Some communities have larger populations than others. Population is the number of people who live in one place. Some communities are crowded with many homes, businesses, and buildings. Other communities have fewer people and more open space. These kinds of differences make each community in our country and the world special. So over here, we've already come across 2 of our vocabulary words. So you can flip back to your previous pages on page 4 and 5, and you can fill in the meaning of those words as we go along. Urban, suburban, and rural communities. There are 3 different kinds of communities in the United States: urban, suburban, and rural. An urban community has many people, busy streets, and buildings that are close together. For example, more than 600,000 people live in the urban community of Denver, Colorado. Cities also offer people many places to work, attractions to see, and places to visit. So generally, when we're thinking about our urban communities, we're thinking about a busy city where people go to work, where there's lots of buildings. A community just outside a city is called a suburb. Some suburban communities have more space between houses and buildings than in cities. The roads have less traffic than cities. Shopping malls and smaller businesses are often located in suburbs. Suburbs have schools and businesses just like the cities, but there are fewer people. About 66,000 people live in Broomfield, a suburb of Denver. Some people who live in Broomfield travel into Denver to work. Did you know? New York City is the largest city in the United States. It has more than 8 million people. Beaufort, Wyoming is one of the smallest communities in the United States. Only one person lives there. The third type of community is rural. Rural communities have small towns, farms, fields, and open land. Toccoa is an example of a rural community. It's located in northern Georgia. Toccoa is a small town with about 8,000 people. Rural towns like Toccoa have fewer businesses than urban or suburban communities. Urban, suburban, and rural communities are very different. However, they depend on each other in many ways. Many people who live in the suburbs travel into urban areas for work. Farmers in the rural area grow food for people in all communities. Factories and cities make products that are sold everywhere. People from all communities in our country come together and connect with each other. People from rural and suburban areas might attend a baseball game in the city. People from cities might visit a forest in a national park. Every summer, millions of people from big cities and small towns attend 4th of July events. These events help connect all Americans. So we've already talked about 3 different kinds of communities that we have. These are important details that you can put into that graphic organizer in our workbook. So when you flip back to your workbook on page 11, those are some important details that you can add when you're talking about investigating different kinds of communities. Page 12, maps and globes. Both maps and globes are useful for locating places on Earth. Maps that show smaller areas are more useful when finding places in communities. A globe is more useful for seeing where oceans, countries, and larger areas of the world are located. Earth can be divided into hemispheres or halves. The prime meridian is an imaginary line that runs from the North Pole to the South Pole. Places east of the line are in the Eastern Hemisphere. Places west of the line are in the Western Hemisphere. The equator is an imaginary line that runs around the Earth. It is halfway between the North Pole and the South Pole. Places north of the equator are in the Northern Hemisphere. Places south of the equator are in the Southern Hemisphere. The United States is in the Northern Hemisphere and the Western Hemisphere. Places on Earth can also be located using longitude and latitude. Lines of longitude measure how far east and west of the prime meridian a place is. Lines of latitude measure how far north and south of the equator a place is. The lines are numbered, and any place on Earth can be located by finding the lines of longitude and where the lines of longitude and latitude cross. Most maps have features that help us use them. The map key or legend explains the symbols on a map. So again, we've touched on a lot of important information here that we can put into our graphic organizer in our workbook. We talked about why people would use maps, why people would use globes. We talked about the prime meridian and the equator. We talked about using lines of longitude and latitude for locating places on the Earth. All of those are important parts and details that you can add into your graphic organizer. Now over here, they were talking about the legend, the map key or the legend that explains symbols on Earth. So usually you'll have a little box in the corner of your map that might show you the symbol for mountains, or the symbol for rivers, or maybe the symbol, if you're looking at a community map, the symbol for the different libraries or where the parks are. Many maps also include a compass rose. It shows which direction north, south, east, and west are on the map. These are also known as the cardinal direction. Many maps are drawn using map scales. A map scale tells the real distance of an area on the map. For example, 1 inch on the map might stand for 10 miles on Earth. So let's take a look at this map that we have up here. You can see that we have our compass rose that has our north, south, east, and west. You can see the different lines of longitude and latitude and their measurements all the way across. Now, page 14, what maps can tell you about your community? Different kinds of maps give different kinds of information. For example, one map might show the streets in a place. Another map of the same place might show where the resources are found. A political map shows where cities, states, and countries are located. Each place is labeled with its name. The boundaries are marked with thin lines. Large bodies of water, such as rivers and oceans, are usually shown too. So this is a political map of Pittsburgh down here at the bottom. And we say it's a political map because it's showing you the lines of where things are split. So over here, you can see on the left side, the dividing line between the state of Ohio and the state of Pennsylvania. We see on the right side that we have a compass rose that shows us our cardinal directions. We see a map key in the top left-hand corner showing us what those different colors and symbols mean. And in the bottom left-hand corner, we can see a map scale that tells us how much that distance actually measures in the real world. A physical map may be similar to a political map, but it gives more detail about what an area is like. Physical maps use different colors to show where things are located. Blue could show water, such as lakes, ponds, rivers, and creeks. A physical map of a large area will show mountain ranges, deserts, and forests. Physical maps also show elevation, or how high an area is. A vegetation map is used to study how and where plants grow. Different colors on the maps show forests, grasslands, swamps, and so on. A resource map shows where resources can be found. Different colors show areas with coal, water, trees, metals, and other things humans use from nature. Let's take a look at this map. This is a physical map of Pittsburgh. I can't get it to open. Okay, so you can see that the high land, the higher areas that are at higher elevation are marked in brown. The lower land is marked in green. We see the bodies of water that are labeled in blue and marked with the names of those places. We have our map scale at the bottom and our compass rose on the right side. And our last 2 pages over here, around the world, Tokyo, Japan. Tokyo is the most populated city on Earth. More than 36 million people live in this urban area. In the main part of the city, about 16,000 people are packed into each square mile. What is life like in such a crowded urban community? Many people in Tokyo live in apartments inside high-rise buildings. The tall buildings allow more people to have homes on a small amount of land. Many of the buildings also have grocery stores, shopping centers, and restaurants in them. Residents can walk to where they need to go. Very few people in Tokyo own cars. Instead, they take trains wherever they need to travel farther than they can walk. English suburbs. In the 1800s, urban areas in England grew more crowded. People lived in the city where they worked. Some people wished they could live somewhere else. Eventually, railroads were built and later cars were invented. By the early 1900s, people could travel quickly to and from cities like London. This allowed them to buy houses outside of the city and still work inside it. As a result, suburban communities developed. In cities like London, families often lived in apartments. Most of the time, they could also walk to nearby markets for shopping. In suburban communities, most families lived in a house, usually with a yard too. All the houses took up a lot of space. The markets were farther away. Owning a car became important. People needed one to reach the markets and to travel to work. Rural Ecuador. Rural areas have open land and fields. People in rural communities often work with the natural resources in the area. Coffee beans grow on plants in tropical areas. People in some rural communities in Ecuador grow coffee beans. People in the communities grow coffee beans in their fields to sell to coffee companies. These communities work together to make sure the crop is a success. Rural communities in other parts of Ecuador have different natural resources. If the community is near open land, people in those communities might grow different crops or raise animals. If the community is near water, the people might use the water to catch fish or create electricity. What do you think? How would you describe your community? Urban, suburban, or rural? Explain your answer. So that takes us to the end of our reading for this first lesson, up through page 11. Once you've completed page 11 and filled in that graphic organizer, we're going to go on to page 12. Now, based on the research and all of the reading that we've done about communities, determine what kind of community you live in. Do you live in an urban, suburban, or rural community? And why do you think people choose to live in your community or the community, the type of community that you live in? Then we're going to complete our paragraph writing underneath on page 12, where it says write and cite evidence. Based on your research, write a paragraph that identifies the type of community where you live. Why do you think people choose to live there? Use facts from your research to explain your answer. So you need to tell what kind of community you live in. You need to write about why people choose to live in that kind of community based on your reading. And you're going to use the information from the textbook and from the workbook to support your answer. Now for the end of this lesson, for page 13, how do features of where you live affect life in your community? So think about the different resources and the different things in your community to answer your question on page 13. That will take us to the end of lesson 1. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful day, 3rd grade. Take care. Bye-bye.